All right, so you ready to kind of like go deep? Let's dive into this whole Malala Yousafzai story. It's pretty amazing actually when you go beyond, just like the typical stuff you hear, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at a bunch of YouTube interviews and news reports.
Oh, cool.
I think you'll be surprised by some of the things that, we find out, right?
Yeah, what really gets me about her story is it's not just about, oh, she was, shot by the Taliban. It's about this like incredible resilience, like a
Right.
whole culture kind of grappling with, tons of changes and this young woman who just like would not give up on, education for everyone.
It's really inspiring, huh?
Yeah.
And it all starts in this place called Swat Valley
Okay.
in Pakistan. It was known for being like incredibly beautiful, like naturally beautiful.
Oh, wow.
But then the Taliban, started to have a bigger and bigger presence there.
It's wild how like Swat Valley changed, right? It was like this major tourist spot.
Yeah,
And then it became this place where it's like fear just took over. The Taliban, they had their own very strict version of Islamic law, and they kind of like they really enforced it.
yeah,
Punishments and all that, and the destruction of girls' schools. I mean, that was huge. Like that really set the stage for Malala's whole story.
right. And that's where we meet her, right? Like in the middle of all this turmoil, there's this young Malala, and she's like super curious, always wants to learn, really competitive too, always wanted to be like number one in her class.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and her dad, Ziauddin Yousafzai, he was all about education.
Okay.
Huge advocate. He actually ran a school for girls, which was, I mean, you can imagine, that was a pretty bold move in that kind of environment.
Yeah.
And he really like instilled in her this love of learning, but also this like sense of justice.
Like it sounds like he was a big influence.
Oh yeah, big time. And even when she was little, you can see how outspoken she was. There's this one video clip where they ask her about all the rules for women, and she's like, if a man can go, why can't a woman? Like, so direct. Right.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, challenging the way things were from like such a young age.
Yeah.
And her dad, he was always there, always supporting her curiosity. That like really set her on this path of becoming an advocate.
Okay.
But it was a dangerous path. Like, can you imagine living under the Taliban's, watch all the time?
Yeah, it must have been scary for them.
Oh, totally. I mean, she had to go to school in plain clothes because of the threat of acid attacks.
What? Really?
Yeah. And like, think about this. She even slept with a knife for protection.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy, right?
Yeah. The whole situation in Swat Valley, it got so bad. Like it really messed with their lives.
Yeah, yeah.
Constantly looking over their shoulders, worried about what might happen. I mean, they even had to become refugees in their own country for a while.
It's hard to imagine going through something like that.
Right. But, even with all that fear, you see how strong Malala was.
Oh, yeah.
There's this one quote where she says, "They cannot stop me. I will get my education if it is in homeschool or any place."
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
So determined. And that determination, I mean, that's kind of what led her to start writing that blog for the BBC.
Right. Yeah, the one that, everyone knows about.
Exactly.
That's so cool that her dad encouraged her to do that, to write about what life was actually like under Taliban rule.
Right. And she used a fake name, right, to stay safe.
Smart.
Yeah. But her writing, it was like really insightful, especially for someone so young.
Yeah, I bet. It was like this window into what was going on in Swat Valley.
And it really emphasized how important it was for girls to get an education. It's crazy to think that these blog posts written by, a young girl end up grabbing the attention of the whole world.
It's amazing.
But of course, that attention also brought more risk, especially from the Taliban.
Yeah, for sure. Once people knew it was her writing the blog, things got even more dangerous.
Yeah, she was doing more public speaking and even got an award from the Pakistani prime minister. But then came the death threats.
Oh, wow.
And they had to like really step up security for her and her family.
Her dad must have felt so torn. On the one hand, he wants to keep her safe, but on the other, he knows how important her voice is.
Yeah, it was this impossible situation.
And it all led up to that awful day, October 9th, 2012, the day everything changed.
Right. She was just riding the school bus.
Yeah, and then a Taliban gunman, he gets on the bus.
Oh, gosh.
And he's looking for Malala specifically. He asks, who is Malala? And then he fires 3 shots.
I can't even imagine.
One of the bullets hit her right in the head. It was all over the news. I mean, the whole world was watching, hoping that she would survive.
It's crazy how something like that can just happen. It's so random.
Yeah, it was a shock. She was treated in Pakistan first, but her condition was really bad. People were really worried.
Yeah.
And then I get this British trauma specialist, Dr. Fiona Reynolds. She just happened to be in Pakistan at the time,
Wow.
right? Crazy timing. So she gets called in, she consults on Malala's case, and she realizes, like, this is really serious.
Yeah.
So Dr. Reynolds makes the call to transfer her to a special hospital in England.
It was risky, right?
Oh, super risky, but it ended up saving her life.
And the craziest thing is how the bullet went through her head.
I know, right?
Like, it missed her brain completely.
It's a miracle. It went under her skin, near the skull, and then stopped in her shoulder.
It's hard to believe.
It did damage her eardrum and a facial nerve, but the fact that she survived at all is pretty amazing. She's a fighter, you know?
That detail always gives me chills. It's like fate had other plans for her.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But even though she survived, her recovery was far from easy.
Oh, I bet.
It was this long, hard road, confusion, learning to walk and talk again.
Just thinking about it is tough.
And then there's the emotional trauma of the attack. I mean, her whole family went through so much.
Yeah.
In her book, she talks about seeing her parents for the first time after it happened. And that's when she cries for the first time, since the shooting.
Oh, wow.
It's like you really see the emotional impact of everything in that moment. But even in that vulnerability, she was so strong. Multiple surgeries, learning to live with facial paralysis.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And then she even got a cochlear implant to regain her hearing.
Wow. It seems like through all of that, her spirit actually got even stronger.
Yeah, it's true. And her focus on her mission, it never wavered. Actually, it's like the attack kind of pushed her onto this global stage.
Right. And that's where things get even more interesting. It's like she goes from this schoolgirl in Swat Valley to an international icon,
Yeah.
a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Like, it's unbelievable.
Her story doesn't just end with her getting better. It kind of like takes on this whole new meaning. She becomes this like global advocate for girls' education.
Yeah.
She gives that incredible speech at the UN on her 16th birthday, writes her book, I Am Malala, starts the Malala Fund. I mean, she's just doing so much.
It's a really remarkable journey. But her story is just one piece of this much bigger puzzle, right?
Right. Her experience really shines a light on how hard it is for girls to get an education in so many parts of the world. And it makes us think about Islam
Yeah.
and how complicated it is and, the danger of extremism and how telling stories can actually spark change.
Yeah. And that's what we're going to look at next, because this whole issue, it involves a lot of different perspectives.
Okay.
You've got, Muslims who are totally behind Malala's cause. Then there's the fundamentalists who think women shouldn't be educated at all.
Right.
And then you've got experts who are trying to make sense of all the political and social stuff going on.
It's important to remember that these aren't just ideas,
Yeah.
We're talking about real people's lives, real struggles. And by understanding Malala's story, we can actually get a better grasp of what girls all over the world is up against.
Yeah. And this is where it gets real for all of us listening.
Right.
Because it's not just about Malala.
Okay.
It's about what we believe in,
Yeah.
what our role is in the world, how we can help make a future where every kid, no matter if they're a boy or a girl or where they come from, can, reach their full potential.
That's a big one.
It is.
It's also how her story has resonated with so many people. It really speaks to the power of what she's saying and how much we all want a fairer world.
Totally.
And what's really interesting is how the world reacted to her story.
Oh, what do you mean? Like how different people responded?
Yeah, exactly. Like on one hand, there was this huge wave of support for Malala and what she was fighting for.
Right.
World leaders came out and condemned the attack. People were rallying behind her cause. And then there were all those documentaries like He Named Me Malala and Bread and Roses.
Oh, yeah, those were great.
Right. They really helped spread her story even further.
She became like this symbol of hope, especially for women and girls who are trying to, fight for their rights.
Exactly. But then there are these other voices, even within the Muslim community, that are a little unsure about Malala and her message. Some are even, against it.
That's right. It's like on the one side, you've got these Muslims who think Malala is a hero.
Yeah.
Like she represents the true spirit of Islam.
Exactly. The idea that knowledge and education are important for everybody.
Right, right. But then you've got the fundamentalists.
Yeah.
They're the ones who think educating women goes against their view of Islamic values.
They see Malala as a tool of the West. Like she's pushing this secular agenda that's trying to, undermine their whole way of life, their ideas about family and tradition.
It's like her story kind of like became this battleground for this bigger argument about like women's place in society.
Right,
This
exactly.
clash between like modern and traditional views, especially within Islam.
And, it's super important that we try to understand these different points of view.
Even the ones that we might not agree with.
Yeah, even those, because that's how we start to grasp how complicated this whole situation really is.
That makes sense. But how do we, like, approach all this complexity without getting totally overwhelmed?
Well, that's where critical thinking comes in, right? It's not about picking sides. It's about looking at the information, thinking about where it's coming from, and forming your own opinions.
So basically, Malala's story is like a doorway to this huge conversation about education, religion, culture, and human rights.
Exactly. It pushes us to see beyond simple labels, to really engage with the nuances of a world that's full of, contradictions.
And this isn't just about stuff happening far away, right?
Right.
It's about us, here and now, how we deal with these challenges.
Yeah, totally. Her story makes us think about our own values, our responsibilities. Like, what does it mean to stand up for what you believe in, even when it's scary?
Yeah,
How can we use our voices to support those who are being silenced?
that's a good question. And how can we help make a world where everyone gets an education? Where it's a right, not just, something for the lucky few.
These are questions that stick with you long after you finish reading about Malala or listening to her speeches.
Yeah,
That's what makes a story truly impactful, It
yeah.
gets you thinking, it makes you feel things, and then it pushes you to do something about it.
And Malala's journey is definitely that. So inspiring.
Yeah, totally. It's like she's reminding us that even when things are really dark, one person can make a difference.
Yeah, one voice can really start a movement,
And a young girl can change the world.
for sure. But, it wasn't just her.
Right.
She had a lot of people supporting her.
Yeah, amplifying her message, helping her turn all that pain into something positive.
Yeah. It's really important to remember that change rarely happens because of just one person.
Right. It takes a group effort,
Yeah, being willing to listen to each other,
learning from each other.
working together.
Yeah, working toward the same goal.
It's a good reminder, especially in a world that feels so divided, right?
Totally. It's a message that goes beyond countries, cultures, religions.
Yeah,
It's about remembering that we're all human and that we all have a responsibility to create a world where everyone has the chance to, live a good life.
and that's where the power of storytelling comes in.
Right.
Malala's story, it connects us.
Yeah.
It inspires us.
It motivates us to actually do something.
It helps us see the world from different perspectives.
Yeah. To understand each other better, even if we're totally different.
And through that understanding, we can start building, bridges and work towards a world that's fairer for everyone.
What's really amazing is how Malala's work has gone beyond just education for girls.
Oh, yeah, she's done a lot more than that.
Right. Like working with Syrian refugees, speaking out against child labor, fighting for peace.
Oh, we didn't know that.
She took something really awful that happened to her and used it to fight for social justice and human rights.
It's really inspiring.
Yeah, it is. And it's not just talk. She opened a school for Syrian refugees.
Oh, wow.
She teamed up with Apple to make educational content. Like, she's making real change happen.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, she really walks the walk, and she does it all with such grace, She's not in it for the attention. It's all about the cause.
It's like she's showing us that we can all make a difference, even if it's just in our own little corner of the world.
Yeah, for sure.
And even in the middle of all the craziness and chaos, we can still choose hope.
Exactly. We can choose to forgive, and we can choose to fight for a better future.
It's a message that reaches way beyond Pakistan.
It's about the human spirit that's inside all of us.
So now that we've explored all this about Malala, let's think about what it means for us.
Right. For each of us listening.
It's easy to get caught up in the big picture, the global movements, the political arguments.
But this deep dive, it's really about what we think about all of this.
Yeah. Taking all these inspiring moments from Malala's journey and using them in our own lives.
We've seen her courage,
Yeah.
her strength, her dedication to education and equality. What's something brave you can do, inspired by her story?
Yeah, maybe it's speaking up against something unfair in your own community, or volunteering for a cause you believe in.
Or even just talking to your friends and family about important issues.
Right. It doesn't have to be this huge thing that changes the world overnight.
Right.
It's about these small acts of courage.
Yeah, those little steps that can add up to something bigger.
Like, think about it. Malala started as just one voice.
One girl.
One girl who just wanted to learn. And look at the impact she's had.
It's really incredible.
It is. But it also shows us that each of us can make a difference, that we all have the power to do good in the world.
And that's what I love about Malala's story.
Yeah.
It's not just about her, it's about all of us. It's about understanding that we all have the power to create change.
That's powerful. And even when we face these huge challenges, we don't have to give up hope.
Right, exactly. Malala said it best, one child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world. So go out there and make that change.
And that brings us to this really interesting point where Malala's story kind of intersects with like the whole complexity of Islam and education.
It's easy to, oversimplify things, but the reality is Islam has so many different beliefs within it. Understanding all those nuances is super important if you want to really grasp what Malala's story is all about.
Yeah, you can't just lump everyone together.
Right. Terms like, moderate Muslims and hardline fundamentalists, those are just labels. It's way more nuanced than that.
So it's not that simple.
No, not at all. For example, Islam has this rich history of, scholarship and intellectual pursuit.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like throughout history, a lot of Islamic scholars have actually argued that education is super important for both men and women.
So when we talk about moderate Muslims supporting Malala, it's more about them seeing her fight for education as being in line with those, like, core Islamic values.
Yeah, exactly. Like valuing knowledge and, wanting to learn and grow. For them, Malala kind of represents the true spirit of Islam.
Okay, that makes sense. But then as we go deeper into the research, we see this other perspective.
Right, what some people call hardline fundamentalism.
And for them, educating women, especially in the way Malala's advocating for it, is seen as a threat.
Exactly. For these groups, Malala's message, especially because it's on this global stage and being amplified by Western media, it challenges how they understand Islamic principles and traditional gender roles.
It's like they see it as, the West imposing its values on them.
Yeah, kind of.
Like a form of cultural imperialism, something that could mess up their whole social structure.
Right. And it's important to remember that we're not just talking about abstract ideas here. These different perspectives actually affect people's lives.
How so?
Well, they influence policies. They determine who gets access to education. They shape the lives of millions of girls.
It's crazy how Malala's story becomes this way to look at these deeper cultural tensions.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, and it's a reminder that even something as seemingly simple as education can be tied up in all these cultural and religious beliefs.
And it's not always easy to navigate those differences.
No, it's not. It takes empathy and
Mm.
understanding
Right.
and a willingness to talk to each other.
That's a good point. It also shows how powerful one voice can be.
Right. Malala didn't just fight for education.
Yeah.
She became a symbol, something that sparked a global conversation. She made us all think about our own assumptions and biases.
It's true. And it's not just about education. She's spoken out against child labor,
Yeah.
fought for refugees, called for peace in war zones.
It's like she took this horrible experience and turned it into like this fuel for a bigger mission.
Wow.
One that's all about social justice and human rights.
And it's not just talk, right?
Right, like that school she opened for Syrian refugees.
Right, right.
Her work with Apple to create educational stuff. She's putting her words into action.
It's really inspiring to see someone actually walk the walk like that.
Yeah, it is.
And she does it all so humbly.
Yeah.
Like she's not trying to be the center of attention.
It's all about the cause.
It's a good reminder that we can all do our part to make a difference.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting to think about Pakistan's education system, too.
Yeah, good point. It's got all kinds of challenges, limited resources, political instability. That whole context is super important for understanding Malala's story.
Yeah, it's more than just her personal journey, right?
Right. Pakistan's education system is complicated. You've got government schools that are struggling,
Yeah,
private schools for the wealthy,
okay.
madrasas, which are religious schools focused on Islamic studies.
Right.
It's all very fragmented. And that leads to inequality in education, especially for girls.
So Malala wasn't just fighting for girls to go to school. She was trying to change the whole system.
Exactly. It was both personal and, a call to action.
Yeah. But even though her story's so powerful, it's gotten some criticism, too.
That's true.
Some people say the Western media has focused so much on Malala that it's kind of overshadowed other activists and organizations that are doing amazing work.
Yeah, that's a valid point.
And there's this debate about whether focusing on one person, even someone as incredible as Malala, kind of takes away from the bigger systemic issues that are at play.
Right, that's a good point. These criticisms actually make us think more carefully about how we approach activism and social change.
Yeah,
It's important to, celebrate individual courage, but we can't forget that complex problems need complex solutions.
so even though Malala's story is super inspiring, it also reminds us that good intentions don't always lead to perfect outcomes.
Right.
And understanding the complexities is crucial if we want to make real, lasting change.
Exactly. And that brings up a really interesting question that Malala's story makes us think about. How do we measure success in the fight for social justice?
Oh, that's a good one.
Is it about individual achievements,
Yeah.
global recognition, or is it about actually making things better for people on the ground?
Yeah, it's a question we all have to grok with.
Exactly. Is it enough to just raise awareness and inspire people, or do we need to see real, concrete changes in people's lives?
It's tough, right?
It is, and it's something that Malala herself seems to be wrestling with.
What do you mean?
Well, in some interviews, she expresses this frustration, like things aren't changing fast enough, the
Yeah.
inequalities are still there, even though she has this platform and she's working so hard.
It's like she's saying that even with all the attention and awards, the fight for social justice is still really, really hard.
Yeah,
It never ends.
it requires constant dedication, working together,
Right.
and a willingness to challenge the way things are.
It makes you think about, like, how much one person can actually achieve versus the need for, like, changing the system itself.
Exactly. It highlights this tension between, celebrating individuals like Malala while also realizing that sometimes individual efforts aren't enough to fix the root causes of inequality. It really does make you think,
Yeah,
about how much one person can actually do.
right.
And then you realize sometimes you need to, change the whole system.
Right, right. It's not always enough to just have one amazing person leading the charge.
Exactly. And that brings us to something really interesting about Malala's story. How do we actually measure success when we're talking about fighting for social justice?
Well, that's a big question.
It is, right.
So what are we talking about? Like individual achievements, global recognition?
Yeah, those things are important.
Okay.
But are those enough?
Or do we need to actually see real changes happening in people's lives?
Right, like tangible improvements.
That's the real test, I guess.
It is, right. And it's something that Malala herself seems to be struggling with.
Really?
Yeah, in some interviews, you can tell she's getting frustrated, like things aren't moving fast enough.
I can see that.
And there are still so many inequalities, even with all the attention she's gotten and all the work she's doing.
It's like she's realizing that even with all the awards and the global platform, the fight for social justice is like this ongoing battle.
Exactly.
It never really ends.
It doesn't.
You constantly have to be dedicated, working with others, challenging the way things are.
Right. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
It's a lot to think about,
It
right?
really is.
Like, where do we go from here?
Right.
I mean, we've explored Malala's incredible story and all these complex issues and asked some tough questions.
We've been on quite a journey.
Yeah. So what's the takeaway for our listeners?
I think it's about shifting our focus.
Okay. From the big picture to something more personal.
Exactly. Malala's story, even though it has these huge global implications, boils down to a really simple but powerful message.
Oh, okay.
Something each of us can take to heart and, actually do something with.
You're talking about, like, how much power one person has to make change.
Exactly. Remember, Malala started as just one voice, one girl who wouldn't be silenced.
Right.
Her courage, her resilience, her belief in education, those are all things we all have inside us.
So it's about finding that courage within ourselves
Yeah,
and using it to make a difference, however we can.
right. Maybe it won't be on the news, but it can still have a ripple effect. Like, imagine mentoring a young girl or volunteering at a school
Okay. Yeah.
or even just talking to people about how important education is.
Right. It doesn't have to be this big world-changing thing.
Exactly. It's about those everyday acts of courage,
Yeah.
those little steps that add up.
Like Malala was just one person, one girl who wanted to learn. And look what happened.
Right.
Her story's pretty incredible.
It really is, but it also shows that each of us has the potential to make a difference.
Yeah. We can all be a force for good.
Absolutely. And that's what's so great about Malala's legacy. It's not just about her.
Okay.
It's about all of us realizing that we can be agents of change, and we can be courageous, resilient, and fight for what's right.
Yeah. And her story reminds us that education isn't just about, learning facts and stuff.
Right. It's way more than that.
It's about giving people the power to shape their own lives and make the world a better place.
Exactly. And that's something that connects all of us no matter where we come from.
Totally.
Like Malala said, one child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a challenge. What's your one pen going to be?
Yeah, what act of courage, no matter how small, are you going to take to make a positive change in the world?
Because remember, a brighter future doesn't come from grand gestures.
Right.
It comes from all of us. People who choose to stand up, speak out, and make a difference.
Exactly.
Malala's story shows us that even one voice can start a global movement. We hope it inspires all of us to find our own voices
Yeah.
and to help create a world where everyone has the right to an education.
That's a world worth fighting for.